The transport ship descended through the thick atmosphere of Vakros Prime, and Lieutenant Daniel Harper pressed his face against the viewport to get a better look at the planet below. Red rocks stretched as far as he could see, broken only by deep canyons and scattered patches of strange purple vegetation. This was a harsh world, the kind of place that killed anything weak or unprepared. Daniel had been in space for 3 years now, but this mission made him more nervous than any combat deployment. The Galactic Hunting Coalition didn't like humans much, and they'd made that clear at every diplomatic meeting. Still, Earth needed allies out here in the frontier systems, so here he was, representing humanity at their most sacred ceremony. The ship landed on a platform carved into the side of a massive cliff. As Daniel stepped out, the heat hit him like a physical force. He adjusted his uniform and grabbed his equipment case, trying to look more confident than he felt. A group of aliens waited at the edge of the landing pad. The one in front stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in dark green scales that looked tough enough to stop bullets. His eyes were yellow with vertical pupils, and when he smiled, Daniel counted at least 50 razor-sharp teeth. "The human finally arrives," the alien said in perfect English, though his accent made every word sound like a threat. "I am Warlord Vexus of the Krill Empire. Welcome to the trials of Fang and Claw." Daniel extended his hand, a human gesture he knew most aliens found strange. Vexus looked at it for a long moment, then deliberately turned away without taking it. "Follow me," Vexus said. "Try not to embarrass yourself too badly." The walk to the ceremonial grounds took nearly an hour. Along the way, Daniel saw dozens of different alien species, all of them predators from their respective worlds. There were cat-like Felinar with retractable claws and muscles that rippled under sleek fur. There were insectoid mantics with blade arms that could slice through steel. There were even gas-breathing Vorash who moved inside containment suits filled with their toxic atmosphere. None of them looked friendly. The ceremonial grounds turned out to be an enormous arena carved directly into the rock. Thousands of aliens filled the seats, and their voices created a roar that echoed off the walls. At the center of the arena floor sat dozens of large cages, each one holding a different kind of creature. Vexus led Daniel to a waiting area where the other participants had gathered. There were 12 of them in total, representing the most prestigious warrior cultures in this sector of space. Daniel was the only human. "Listen carefully," Vexus announced, his voice amplified somehow to fill the entire arena. "The trials of Fang and Claw have existed for 10,000 years. They test the bond between hunter and beast, between warrior and predator. Each of you will select a creature from the pens. Through the ancient neural bonding ritual, you will link your mind with theirs. From that moment forward, you will hunt together, fight together, and prove your worth together." The crowd cheered, a sound that made Daniel's bones vibrate. "But understand this," Vexus continued, and his yellow eyes fixed on Daniel. "The bond is sacred. Choose poorly, and you shame not just yourself but your entire species. Choose a weak creature, and everyone will know you are weak as well." The message was clear. This whole ceremony was designed to humiliate him. The selection process began. Each participant walked among the cages, studying the creatures inside. The first to choose was a krill warrior named Scar. He selected a massive 6-legged beast with armor plates and horns as long as Daniel's arm. The crowd roared approval. One by one, the other participants made their choices. Powerful predators, vicious hunters, creatures that looked like nightmares made flesh. Every selection earned cheers and applause from the watching aliens. Finally, only Daniel remained. He walked slowly along the row of cages, aware that every eye in the arena watched him. Most of the impressive creatures were already gone. What remained were the less desirable options, smaller predators or older ones past their prime. Then he saw it, at the very end of the row. The cage was smaller than the others, tucked away in a corner where most people wouldn't notice it. Inside was a creature unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. It had 4 legs and a long tail, with dark fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The creature was small, maybe the size of a large dog with a twisted front leg that clearly didn't work right. A handler noticed Daniel looking and walked over. "Don't waste your time with that one," the handler said. He was a short, stocky alien with gray skin and too many fingers. That's a Shadestalker runt. Deformed. Rejected by everyone. We're putting it down after the ceremony. Daniel knelt in front of the cage. The creature watched him with eyes that glowed faintly in the shadows. There was intelligence in that gaze, and something else. Not fear exactly, but caution. Calculation. What can it do? Daniel asked. The handler shrugged. Shadestalkers can shift their density, phase through solid matter for a few seconds. They're from a high-gravity death world, tough as hell normally, but this one? He shook his head. Too small, bad leg won't last a day in the trials. In the stands, someone had noticed where Daniel stood. Laughter began to ripple through the crowd. Vexus's voice boomed across the arena. The human considers. The reject, how appropriate, the weakest hunter for the weakest beast. The laughter grew louder. Daniel ignored it. He kept his eyes on the creature in the cage. Through his training as a xenobiologist, he'd learned to read animal behavior across dozens of species, and what he saw in this creature's eyes wasn't weakness. It was patience. The other Shadestalkers had been huge, aggressive, dominant. They'd practically radiated power, but they'd also been stupid, all instinct and no thought. This one was different. Smaller, yes. Injured, definitely. But while its siblings had thrown themselves at the cage bars or paced in circles, this creature sat perfectly still and watched everything. Daniel thought about the wolves back on Earth, how the runts of the litter often became the smartest, the most adaptable. He thought about how humans themselves had been the runts of Earth's predators, weaker and slower than bears or lions, but smart enough to survive and eventually thrive. He made his decision. I choose this one, Daniel said loudly. The laughter in the arena became deafening. Aliens howled and shrieked with amusement. Vexus laughed so hard he had to lean against the arena wall for support. The human has chosen, Vexus announced when he could speak again. The reject and the runt together at last. Let no one say we didn't warn him. The handler opened the cage with obvious reluctance. The creature limped out slowly, favoring its good legs. It was even smaller outside the cage, barely reaching Daniel's knee. Several aliens in the front rows pointed and made comments in languages Daniel didn't understand, but the mocking tone needed no translation. Daniel knelt down and extended his hand, palm up, just like he would with a nervous dog. The creature approached cautiously, sniffed his hand, then looked up at him with those glowing eyes. In that moment, Daniel felt something. A whisper at the edge of his thoughts, tentative and curious. The neural bond was beginning to form. I'm Daniel, he said softly. And you're going to be Ghost. The creature, Ghost, tilted its head slightly. Then, to Daniel's surprise, it made a sound almost like a purr. The bonding ritual took place at sunset. Each participant stood in a circle drawn in the arena sand, their chosen creature beside them. Ancient words were spoken in a language that predated most modern civilizations. Daniel felt the neural connection strengthen, felt his thoughts beginning to merge with Ghost's in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Through the bond, he sensed Ghost's pain from the malformed leg, but also the creature's fierce intelligence and determination. Ghost had been rejected by everyone, treated as worthless, scheduled for death. The creature had every reason to be broken and defeated. Instead, Ghost was angry. Not wild, uncontrolled anger, but cold fury mixed with iron will. Ghost wanted to prove them all wrong. Wanted to show that being small and injured didn't mean being weak. Daniel smiled. He understood that feeling perfectly. When the ceremony ended, Vexus approached them with several other senior coalition members. They looked at Daniel and Ghost with barely concealed contempt. The first trial begins in 3 days, Vexus said. You'll be hunting in the Crimson Wastes. We've assigned you to Sector 7, the furthest and most dangerous area. I suggest you use the time to make peace with whatever gods your species believes in. You won't survive. Daniel met the warlord's yellow eyes without flinching. We'll see, he said quietly. That night, in the small quarters assigned to him, Daniel sat with Ghost and began to plan. The other participants would spend the next 3, days resting, showing off their powerful creatures and boasting about their coming victories. Daniel had different ideas. Through the neural bond, he shared his thoughts with Ghost, showed the creature images and concepts from Earth, pack hunting strategies from wolves, ambush tactics from big cats, tool use from early humans, patience, and planning from every successful predator that had ever lived. Ghost absorbed it all with an eagerness that surprised Daniel. The creature was hungry for knowledge, desperate to learn and grow. Together, they began to train. 3 days wasn't much time. But Daniel had learned long ago that quality mattered more than quantity. While the other hunters rested, and the crimson waste stretched before Daniel like an ocean of red sand and jagged rocks. The heat was brutal even through his protective suit, and the twin suns beat down without mercy. Somewhere out there was their target, a thunderhorn, one of the most dangerous herbivores in known space. Ghost limped beside him, the creature's dark fur now covered in fine red dust. Through their neural bond, Daniel felt Ghost's discomfort from the heat and the rough terrain, but also the Shadestalker's determination to keep moving. They'd been assigned to Sector 7 exactly as Vexus had promised. The area was further from the main hunting grounds and far more treacherous. The other participants had been given territories with better shelter, more water sources, and easier prey. It was another attempt to make them fail. Daniel didn't care. He'd grown up in the Arizona desert and knew how to survive in environments like this. More importantly, he had a plan. The first thing he did was stop trying to hunt. Instead, he found a sheltered area between two large rocks that provided shade and protection from the wind. He set up a small camp using supplies from his pack. Ghost watched him with those glowing eyes, confused. Through the neural bond, Daniel sensed the creature's question. Why weren't they tracking their prey? Why were they wasting time? Because, Daniel said out loud, knowing Ghost could sense his meaning through the bond. Hunting isn't just about chasing and killing. It's about understanding. He pulled out a small tablet and began reviewing the data files he'd downloaded about thunderhorns. The creatures were massive, weighing nearly 4 tons each, with 6 powerful legs and armor plating that could deflect most weapons. Their horns, which gave them their name, could generate sonic blasts strong enough to stun or kill predators. Most coalition hunters would approach this as a test of strength. They'd use their bonded predators to attack directly, relying on speed and ferocity to bring down the thunderhorn before it could mount an effective defense. Daniel had no intention of fighting fair. Over the next 3 days, he and Ghost didn't hunt. Instead, they studied. They tracked thunderhorn prints in the sand, learning the patterns of movement. They found watering holes and observed from a distance, noting when the creatures drank and how they behaved. They examined the plants the thunderhorns ate and mapped out feeding territories. Daniel taught Ghost to be patient, to watch and learn before acting. At night, sitting in their sheltered camp, he shared knowledge through the neural bond. He showed Ghost memories of human hunters on Earth, how they would study their prey for days or weeks before making a move. He shared images of persistence hunting, where humans would chase prey over long distances, not trying to be faster but simply outlasting them. Ghost absorbed everything with an intelligence that amazed Daniel. The Shadestalker's mind was sharp and adaptable, capable of understanding complex concepts that Daniel would have thought beyond an animal's comprehension. Ghost wasn't just learning tactics. The creature was learning to think strategically. On the 4th day, Daniel found what he was looking for. A narrow canyon about 2 miles from their camp with steep walls on both sides and a floor covered in loose stones. A thunderhorn trail led directly through it, deep prints in the sand showing this was a regular route. Perfect, Daniel said. Through the bond, Ghost understood. This was where they would hunt. Daniel spent the next several hours preparing the ambush. He gathered rocks and arranged them in specific patterns along the canyon walls. He used strips of cloth from his spare clothing to create simple markers. He even fashioned a crude spear from a long piece of metal debris he'd found, sharpening one end against the rocks. The other coalition members would have mocked him for using tools. Predators didn't need such things. They had claws and fangs and natural weapons. But Daniel wasn't trying to be a predator in the traditional sense. He was being human, and humans had conquered Earth not through superior strength but through superior thinking. Finally, on the 5th day, they were ready. Daniel positioned himself at the far end of the canyon, hidden behind rocks where the Thunderhorn wouldn't see him until it was too late. Ghost took position higher up on the canyon wall, using the creature's natural ability to phase through solid rock to reach a spot that would have been impossible for most beings to access. Then they waited. Patience was the hardest part. Hours passed under the burning suns. Daniel's water supply ran low. His legs cramped from staying in one position. But he didn't move, and through the bond he encouraged Ghost to remain still as well. Finally, late in the afternoon, he heard it. The distinctive thud of 6 heavy legs moving across sand. The Thunderhorn was coming. Daniel felt his heart rate increase but forced himself to stay calm. Through the bond, he sensed Ghost's excitement and sent waves of patience and control. Not yet. Wait for the right moment. The Thunderhorn entered the canyon. It was even bigger than Daniel had expected, its armor-plated hide gleaming in the sunlight, its horns massive and deadly. The creature moved with the confidence of something that had no natural predators. Daniel waited until the Thunderhorn was exactly where he wanted it, in the center of the canyon where the walls were highest and the escape routes most limited. Then he stood up and shouted, waving his arms. The Thunderhorn saw him immediately, its head lowered, horns beginning to glow as it prepared to unleash a sonic blast that would turn Daniel's internal organs to jelly. But Daniel was already moving. He'd studied the terrain carefully and knew exactly where to go. He jumped behind a specific rock formation, one he'd tested earlier to confirm it would block the sonic waves. The Thunderhorn's blast echoed through the canyon, shaking loose stones from the walls. But Daniel was safe, and now the creature was angry. It charged toward him, exactly as he'd hoped. Daniel ran, but not away from the Thunderhorn. He ran along a path he'd carefully planned, leading the creature deeper into the canyon. The Thunderhorn followed, its rage overriding its caution. At the right moment, Daniel sent a mental signal through the bond. Now, Ghost dropped from above, the Shade Stalker's small body becoming dense and heavy as it fell. The creature landed precisely on the Thunderhorn's back, right between the armor plates where a gap existed near the neck joint. Ghost's claws found purchase, and then the Shade Stalker did something that made Daniel's plan work. Ghost phased. The creature's ability to shift density worked both ways. Ghost became partially intangible, and for just a moment the Shade Stalker's claws passed through the armor plating that would have stopped them. When Ghost became solid again, those claws were already inside the Thunderhorn's body, buried in the vital blood vessels that fed the creature's brain. The Thunderhorn thrashed and bucked, trying to throw Ghost off. But the Shade Stalker held on with desperate strength, enhanced by the neural bond with Daniel. Through their connection, Daniel fed Ghost his own determination, his own will to survive and succeed. The Thunderhorn's movements became weaker. It stumbled, crashed into the canyon wall, then finally collapsed. Ghost released the creature and limped away, exhausted. Through the bond, Daniel felt the Shade Stalker's pain and fatigue, but also something new. Pride. Ghost had done it. They had done it. Daniel approached slowly, checking to make sure the Thunderhorn was truly dead. It was. A clean kill, faster and more efficient than any direct battle would have been. He activated his communicator to signal the Coalition observers that the trial was complete. Then he sat down next to Ghost, and together they rested in the shadow of their kill. The journey back to the Coalition arena took 2 days. They had to drag the Thunderhorn's body, proof of their success, across miles of desert. It was exhausting work, but Daniel and Ghost managed it together, taking turns pulling when one grew too tired. When they finally arrived at the arena, the other participants had already returned. Most had succeeded in their hunts, though several had failed and been eliminated from the trials. The successful hunters stood with their kills displayed proudly, their bonded predators beside them looking fierce and powerful. Daniel and Ghost dragged their Thunderhorn through the main gate. Immediately, the noise in the arena dropped. Aliens turned to stare. Vexus approached, his yellow eyes wide with disbelief. "Impossible," the warlord said. "Sector 7 is the hardest territory. The Thunderhorns there are the largest and most aggressive. How did you—" "We hunted it," Daniel said simply. Vexus circled the dead Thunderhorn, examining it. When he found the killing wound, his scales seemed to darken with anger. "You used tricks," he spat. "This wasn't a fair fight. You ambushed it, used tools, manipulated the terrain. This is not how the Coalition hunts." The trial was to bring down a thunderhorn, Daniel replied calmly. We brought down a thunderhorn. I don't remember any rules about how we had to do it. A senior coalition member, an elderly Felinar with gray fur, stepped forward. She examined the thunderhorn carefully, then looked at Daniel with something that might have been respect. The human is correct, she said. The trial's test results, not methods. By ancient law, any hunt that succeeds is valid. Vexus looked like he wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The rules were clear and they'd been established thousands of years before humans even existed. This isn't over, Vexus growled at Daniel. The next trials will be harder. Much harder. Daniel just nodded. He'd expected nothing less. That night, in his quarters, Daniel tended to ghosts. The floating gardens of Nexus defied everything Daniel understood about physics. Massive islands of rock and soil hung in the air with no visible means of support, connected by shimmering bridges made of pure energy. Each island supported its own ecosystem of strange plants and dangerous animals. Daniel stood at the edge of the landing platform, looking out at the impossible landscape. Hundreds of feet below, nothing but empty air and clouds. Above, more islands stretched toward a purple sky. Somewhere among all of this, sky serpents hunted in packs. Ghost pressed close to Daniel's leg, the shade stalker's nervousness flowing through their neural bond. The creature had never been in an environment like this. Neither had Daniel, for that matter. The trial coordinator, a floating spherical alien made of what looked like living crystal, explained the rules in a voice like chiming bells. Sky serpents hunt in coordinated flocks. They are intelligent pack predators with the ability to discharge bioelectric energy. Each bonded pair must capture or kill at least one serpent to pass this trial. You have 5 days. The other participants looked confident. Most had bonded with creatures that could fly or at least glide. The Krill warrior Scar had a massive winged beast that could carry him through the air. A Felinar named Kresh rode a sleek creature that looked like a dragon made of living metal. They launched into the air one by one, their predators carrying them toward the hunting grounds with grace and power. Daniel and Ghost remained on the platform. The trial coordinator floated closer, its crystalline body refracting light in rainbow patterns. Your creature cannot fly, it observed. Do you wish to withdraw from the trial? No, Daniel said. We just need to think about this differently. The coordinator made a sound like breaking glass. Laughter, Daniel realized. The trial grounds are accessible only by flight. The energy bridges can be used, but they connect only the lower islands. The sky serpents hunt in the upper reaches. Without flight, you cannot reach them. We'll figure something out, Daniel said. The coordinator floated away, still making its glass-breaking laugh. Daniel didn't care. He'd already started planning. Over the next few hours, Daniel and Ghost explored the lower islands, the ones the other hunters had ignored. These islands were older, covered in ruins of some ancient civilization. The trial coordinator had been right. The energy bridges did connect these lower islands, creating a network that stayed far below where the sky serpents hunted. But Daniel wasn't looking for sky serpents yet. He was looking for resources. In the ruins of what might have been a city, he found what he needed. Ancient structures made of strange materials, some of them still holding faint charges of energy. Metallic cables that responded to his touch, fragments of technology that had survived thousands of years. Through the neural bond, Ghost sensed Daniel's excitement and growing understanding. The creature watched as Daniel began gathering materials, dragging pieces of metal and cable to a central location. We can't go up to them, Daniel explained to Ghost, knowing the creature could sense his meaning, even if the words themselves meant nothing, so we'll make them come down to us. For 2 full days, while the other participants hunted in the upper reaches, Daniel worked. He built something that would have made the coalition members mock him if they'd seen it. A trap, but one unlike any that existed in nature. He used the conductive cables to create a network across 3 connected islands. He positioned pieces of metallic debris at specific points, testing and adjusting until he got the angles right. He even constructed a crude battery using materials from his supply pack and some of the ancient technology from the ruins. Ghost helped, using the creature's ability to phase through solid matter, to thread cables through narrow spaces and position materials on cliff faces that Daniel couldn't reach. They worked as a perfect team, each understanding their role without needing to discuss it. On the 3rd day, Daniel was ready to test his theory. He'd observed sky serpents from a distance and noticed something important. The creatures followed the energy bridges, using them like roads through the sky. They could sense electromagnetic fields and used them for navigation. So Daniel created an artificial electromagnetic field, one that mimicked the signature of the energy bridges, but led from the upper islands down to his trap location. The first sky serpent appeared an hour after he activated his makeshift device. The creature was beautiful in a deadly way, with a long serpentine body covered in blue scales that crackled with electricity. Its wings were translucent membranes that caught the light. It followed Daniel's false energy trail, curious about this new bridge that hadn't existed before. The serpent descended toward the lower islands, and Daniel held his breath. If his calculations were wrong, the creature would realize the deception and fly away. He'd only get one chance at this. The sky serpent entered the space between the three islands where Daniel had positioned his conductive cables. Immediately, it sensed something wrong and began to turn. Daniel triggered the trap. The metallic debris he'd positioned acted as lightning rods, drawing the serpent's bioelectric charge. The conductive cables channeled that energy through the network Daniel had built. And the crude battery he'd constructed stored just enough power to create a feedback loop. The sky serpent's own electricity was turned against it, flowing through the cables and back into the creature in a concentrated pulse. The serpent shrieked and fell, its wings spasming. It crashed onto one of the lower islands, stunned but alive. Ghost moved before Daniel could even send the command. The Shadestalker had learned to anticipate, to understand strategy. Ghost phased through the short drop to the island below and reached the stunned serpent in seconds. The fight was brief. The sky serpent was dangerous even when injured, its body crackling with residual electricity. But Ghost had learned much over the past weeks. The Shadestalker dodged and weaved, using superior agility to avoid the serpent's strikes. When an opening appeared, Ghost delivered a precise bite to the base of the serpent's skull. The creature stopped moving. Daniel climbed down to join Ghost, and together they examined their prize. One sky serpent captured through tactics and planning rather than aerial combat. But Daniel wasn't satisfied with just one. He reset his trap and waited. Sky serpents hunted in flocks, and where there was one, more would follow. His fake energy bridge still broadcast its signal, tempting and mysterious. Two more serpents arrived, flying together. They were more cautious than the first, circling the area and examining it with intelligent eyes. Daniel had anticipated this. He activated a second part of his trap, one he'd built specifically for smart prey. He used Ghost as bait. The Shadestalker moved into view, apparently helpless on one of the lower islands. The sky serpents saw easy prey and dove to attack. They entered the trap zone, and Daniel triggered the feedback loop again. Both serpents were caught by their own electricity, redirected and amplified by his crude but effective system. These two were stronger than the first, more resistant to the electrical feedback. They managed to pull away before being fully stunned, but they were disoriented and angry, which was exactly what Daniel wanted. Angry predators made mistakes. The two sky serpents attacked each other, each thinking the other had somehow caused the painful electrical shock. They fought in midair, their bodies crackling with energy, and both were too focused on their battle to notice Ghost approaching from below. The Shadestalker had grown stronger over the past weeks. The constant challenges and good food had helped, but more importantly, the mental stimulation and training had developed Ghost's capabilities beyond what should have been possible for such a young creature. Ghost leaped, using the phasing ability to pass through solid rock and launch from an unexpected angle. The Shadestalker hit one of the serpents at the base of its wing, claws finding purchase in the delicate membrane. The serpent tried to shake Ghost off, but the Shadestalker held on with determination Daniel could feel through their bond. They fell together, but Ghost was prepared for that. As they dropped toward the island surface, Ghost shifted density, becoming heavy enough to drag the serpent down faster. They hit hard, and Ghost used the momentum to pin the serpent's head against the rock. Another precise bite, and the second serpent stopped struggling. The third serpent, seeing its companion killed, fled into the upper reaches. Daniel let it go. 3 sky serpents were more than enough to pass the trial. That night, exhausted but victorious, Daniel and Ghost rested on one of the lower islands. Through the neural bond, they shared feelings of satisfaction and pride. They'd succeeded again, and once more they'd done it in a way no coalition member would have predicted. Daniel looked up at the sky, watching the energy bridges shimmer in the darkness. Somewhere up there, the other participants were hunting in the traditional way, using their flying predators to chase down sky serpents in aerial combat. It was glorious and dramatic and exactly what the coalition expected, but it wasn't efficient, and it wasn't smart. When they returned to the coalition arena 2 days later, the reaction was different than before. Vexus still looked angry, his yellow eyes burning with hatred as he examined the 3 sky serpents Daniel had captured. But other coalition members whispered among themselves, and some of those whispers didn't sound mocking. The elderly Felinar who defended Daniel. The arena fell silent as Daniel and Ghost entered with their prize. Other participants had returned with smaller eels or had given up entirely. Several teams had been eliminated, their members injured or their bonded creatures killed by the aggressive predators. But Daniel and Ghost had killed one of the largest abyss eels anyone had seen, and they'd done it with barely a scratch on either of them. Vexus stared at the dead eel with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. Rage, yes, but also something else. Fear, perhaps. The warlord had thrown everything he could at the human and his runt Shadestalker. And they'd succeeded every time. Elder Shira approached Daniel privately after the initial examination of his kill. Vexus called another council meeting, she said quietly. The old guard is terrified. You've proven that coalition tragedy? The drowned cities lived up to their name. Ancient towers rose from dark water like the bones of dead giants. The sky above was gray and heavy with clouds that never broke, and the water below was black and cold. Somewhere in those depths, abyss eels hunted. Daniel stood at the edge of a partially submerged platform, looking down into the water with Ghost beside him. Through their bond, he felt the Shadestalker's uncertainty. Ghost had never seen this much water before and clearly didn't like it. The trial coordinator, a different one this time, a slug-like creature with too many eyes, explained the rules through a mechanical translator that made its voice sound wet and gurgling. Abyss eels are the apex predators of this environment. They can regenerate from almost any injury. They hunt in packs with coordinated intelligence. You must kill or capture at least 1 eel to pass this trial. You have 7 days. 7 days in this flooded nightmare. Daniel had brought underwater breathing equipment, but it was designed for short dives, not extended underwater hunting. Most of the other participants had bonded creatures that were comfortable in water or could hold their breath for hours. Vexus approached the platform, his scales gleaming with moisture. His bonded Shadestalker, Razor, stood beside him. Razor was everything Ghost wasn't, huge, powerful, perfect. The creature made Ghost look like a child's pet by comparison. The drowned cities will be your grave, human, Vexus said. There are no tricks here, no tools to build, no traps to set. Only water and death. Your pathetic creature will drown and you will watch it happen. Daniel met his eyes without flinching. We'll see. After Vexus left, Elder Shira approached more quietly. Be careful, she warned. Vexus has influence with the trial coordinators. The sector they assigned you is the deepest and most dangerous. The abyss eels there are older and larger than anywhere else in the cities. Of course they are, Daniel said. Shira hesitated, then spoke more softly. I have been watching you, human. You think differently than any coalition member. You see possibilities where we see only limitations. But water is unforgiving. Strategy and planning cannot help you breathe underwater. Maybe not, Daniel agreed. But they can help us survive. For the first day, Daniel and Ghost explored the upper levels of the drowned structures, the areas that were partially above water. Daniel found what remained of the ancient city's architecture and began to understand how it had been designed. The buildings were connected by tunnels and passages, some still air-filled, creating a network through the ruins. Ghost learned to swim, though the creature clearly hated it. The Shadestalker's injured leg made swimming harder, but Ghost's determination pushed through the difficulty. Through the bond, Daniel encouraged and praised, and gradually Ghost became more comfortable in the water. On the second day, Daniel began to observe the abyss eels from safe positions. The creatures were terrifying, easily 30 feet long with muscular bodies and mouths full of teeth designed for tearing. They moved through the water with liquid grace, and Daniel watched them hunt smaller fish with coordinated precision. But as he watched, he noticed something important. The eels were territorial. Different groups controlled different sections of the drowned city, and they didn't cross into each other's areas. The boundaries were invisible but very real. Daniel spent hours mapping these territories, noting which groups patrolled which areas and how they reacted when smaller fish crossed the boundaries. The eels were aggressive toward intruders but also strategic. They didn't waste energy on fights they couldn't win. On the third day, he found what he was looking for: a narrow boundary zone where 3 different eel territories converged. The groups avoided this area, creating a kind of neutral zone where none of them wanted to risk conflict. That night, Daniel explained his plan to Ghost through the neural bond. Not words, but images and feelings. They weren't going to fight the abyss eels directly. That would be suicide. Instead, they were going to make the eels fight each other. The plan was risky and required perfect timing. Over the next 2 days, Daniel and Ghost prepared. They caught fish from the safer upper levels and stored them in the air-filled passages. They studied the patrol patterns of the 3 eel groups until Daniel could predict their movements to the minute. On the 6th day, they put the plan into action. Daniel started by taking dead fish from their storage and placing them in specific locations along the territorial boundaries. He chose spots that would make it look like one eel group was deliberately invading another's territory and leaving food as a taunt. The eels noticed. They were intelligent enough to see the fish and interpret it as an insult. Tensions began to rise. Next, Ghost swam into the territory of the first eel group. The Shade Stalker moved fast, using the phasing ability to slip through underwater structures in ways the eels couldn't follow. Ghost grabbed a small fish from the first group's hunting grounds and then swam across the boundary into the second group's territory. To the eels, it looked like the first group was stealing from them. The second group responded with aggression, sending scouts to the boundary line. Ghost, meanwhile, had already moved to the third group's territory, repeating the same action. Stealing from one group and depositing the stolen prey in another group's area, the eels began to patrol the boundaries more aggressively. They sent threatening displays toward each other, posturing and showing teeth. The tension built like pressure in a closed container. Daniel waited for exactly the right moment. Then he and Ghost entered the neutral zone, the area where all 3 territories met. They made noise, splashing and moving in ways that would draw attention. All 3 eel groups saw them at the same time. The eels converged on the neutral zone from 3 directions, each group wanting to be the one to claim this intruder in their waters. But as they approached, they found themselves facing not just prey but rival groups. The territorial instincts overrode everything else. The eels forgot about Daniel and Ghost and focused on each other. 3 groups, each trying to assert dominance, each refusing to back down. The battle was savage. Eels tore at each other with massive jaws. Blood clouded the water. The creatures' regenerative abilities meant they could survive injuries that would kill most predators. But it also meant the fight lasted longer and grew more vicious. Daniel and Ghost retreated to a safe position in an air-filled passage and watched. Through the neural bond, Daniel felt Ghost's satisfaction at the plan working, but also the Shade Stalker's growing confidence. Ghost was learning that strength wasn't just physical. Strategy and manipulation could be just as powerful as claws and teeth. The battle lasted for hours. Eventually, one eel group retreated, too damaged to continue. The remaining 2 groups fought until exhaustion, and finally, one alpha eel emerged victorious. The creature was enormous, scarred from dozens of wounds that were already beginning to heal. But the eel was also tired, weakened from the prolonged fight. It swam slowly back toward its territory, leaving a trail of blood in the dark water. Daniel and Ghost followed at a safe distance. When the alpha eel finally stopped to rest in a partially submerged structure, Daniel made his move. He used one of the spears he'd crafted from scavenged metal, waited to throw underwater. The spear wasn't meant to kill the eel. Even weakened, the creature's regeneration would heal most wounds. Instead, Daniel aimed for the eel's eye. The throw was perfect. The spear struck true and the eel thrashed in pain and rage. It was still dangerous, still deadly, but now it was also blind on one side and enraged. Ghost moved in from the opposite direction, the side where the eel couldn't see. The Shade Stalker had grown considerably over the past weeks, and while still smaller than full-grown, Ghost was now large enough and skilled enough to be truly dangerous. The fight was brief, but intense. Ghost used speed and the phasing ability to avoid the eel's snapping jaws while delivering precise strikes to vulnerable spots. The neural bond allowed Daniel to guide Ghost's movements, calling out warnings and opportunities that the Shadestalker immediately understood and acted upon. Finally, Ghost delivered a killing bite to the base of the eel's skull, severing the spine. Even the abyss eel's regeneration couldn't recover from that immediately. The creature stopped moving and Daniel confirmed it was dead. They'd done it. One abyss eel, killed through strategy and manipulation rather than direct combat. The journey back to the Coalition arena was difficult, dragging the massive eel corpse through the drowned city and then loading it onto the transport took all of their remaining strength. But when they finally arrived, the reaction made it worthwhile. The morning of the combat trials arrived with heavy clouds and distant thunder. The arena was packed with more aliens than Daniel had ever seen in one place. Word had spread across Coalition space about the human and his runt Shadestalker, who had succeeded through strategy rather than strength. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Daniel stood in the waiting area with Ghost beside him. The Shadestalker had grown significantly over the past weeks, still smaller than a fully mature specimen but stronger, faster and far more intelligent than any young Shadestalker should be. The constant mental stimulation and challenges had pushed Ghost's development beyond natural limits. Through their neural bond, Daniel felt Ghost's nervousness, but also determination. They both knew what they faced. 8 bonded pairs remained in the trials, including Vexus and Razor. In a tournament of direct combat, the odds were against them, but Daniel had a plan. Before the first match could begin, he stepped forward and raised his hand, invoking an ancient rite that Elder Shira had told him about, the right of address, a provision that allowed any participant to speak before the final trial. The arena fell silent. Vexus looked furious but couldn't deny the request. It was ancient law, older than the Coalition itself. Daniel walked to the center of the arena floor. His voice was amplified somehow, carrying to every corner of the massive structure and broadcast to millions watching across Coalition space. "I'm not a warrior by your standards," he began. "I don't have scales or claws or natural weapons. My bonded partner was rejected by everyone, considered worthless, scheduled for termination." He paused, letting that sink in. "But we've succeeded in every trial, not through strength or ferocity, but through thinking, planning, and working together. And that's what I want to talk about today, what it really means to be a predator." Vexus started to interrupt, but Elder Shira held up a hand to stop him. The right of address was absolute. "On my homeworld, Earth," Daniel continued, "we had predators far stronger than humans. Bears that could break trees with their paws, lions with teeth and claws that could tear through flesh like paper, big cats that could run faster than any human could ever hope to move." He walked slowly as he spoke, and Ghost limped beside him, perfectly synchronized through their bond. But humans survived. We became the apex predators of our world not because we were strongest, but because we were smartest. We learned to work together, to use tools, to adapt to any environment. We learned that true strength isn't just physical power. It's the ability to change, to evolve, to find new solutions to old problems. Daniel could see some of the younger Coalition members nodding. The older ones looked uncomfortable. This tournament is designed to prove that the old ways are best. That raw combat ability is what matters most. But I want to propose something different. Now Vexus did speak up. "You cannot change the trial once it has begun, human." "I'm not trying to change it," Daniel said. "I'm offering an alternative. Let the Coalition release their most dangerous creature, whatever they consider the ultimate predator. Not for us to fight each other, but to hunt together." The arena erupted in noise. Aliens shouted in dozens of languages, some supporting the idea, many opposing it. Vexus looked like he wanted to tear Daniel apart with his bare claws. Elder Shira stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. "The human makes an interesting proposal, but if we are to consider it, the creature must truly be worthy. It must be something that represents a genuine threat." One of the other senior Coalition members, a massive insectoid mantix, spoke up. "We have such a creature, the Void Stalker, captured during the deep space expedition to the Outer Rim. It has killed everything we've ever pitted against it. We keep it in stasis because nothing else can contain it." A ripple of fear went through the crowd. Even Vexus looked uncertain. "The Void Stalker is too dangerous," another council member protested. "It doesn't just hunt. It toys with its prey. Releasing it could result in mass casualties." "Then it's the perfect test," Daniel said. "If Coalition traditions are truly superior, then your strongest warriors should be able to defeat it. And if cooperation and strategy work better, then we'll prove that together. The council debated for over an hour while the crowd waited impatiently. Finally, they reached a compromise. There would be one final hunt, but it would still be a competition. All remaining bonded pairs would enter a closed environment simultaneously. The first to bring down the Void Stalker would be declared the ultimate victor of the trials. Vexus voted against it, but he was outvoted. The warlord's face twisted with rage as he realized his perfect plan had been disrupted. The hunting ground was revealed to be an enormous artificial habitat, a massive dome that contained multiple biomes. Frozen tundra, scorching desert, dense jungle, barren rock fields. The environment shifted and changed, designed to give the Void Stalker every possible advantage. As the creature was released from its stasis field, Daniel got his first look at it. The Void Stalker was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Its body seemed to exist partially outside normal space, constantly shifting and adapting. One moment it looked solid, the next it was transparent, visible only as a distortion in the air. It had no fixed form, changing to match whatever environment it moved through. All 8 bonded pairs were released into the habitat from different entry points. The rules were simple. Find and kill the Void Stalker. First team to succeed wins everything. Daniel and Ghost entered through a gate that opened into the jungle biome. Immediately, Ghost's senses detected danger. Through the bond, Daniel felt the Shade Stalker's heightened alertness. The Void Stalker was already hunting. They heard the first death scream less than 20 minutes later. A bonded pair from the Mantic species, torn apart before they even realized the Void Stalker was there. The creature had attacked from a dimensional rift appearing behind them and gone before their bodies hit the ground. Daniel and Ghost moved carefully, using every bit of training and experience they'd gained. They didn't try to track the Void Stalker. Instead, they tracked its kills, mapping a pattern of attacks across the habitat. More screams echoed through the dome. Another pair eliminated. Then another. The Void Stalker wasn't just killing efficiently, it was playing with them, testing each pair's capabilities before striking. Vexus and Razor hunted aggressively, following the sounds of combat, trying to catch the Void Stalker during one of its attacks. But the creature was always gone before they arrived. Daniel took a different approach. He stopped trying to hunt the Void Stalker as prey and started trying to understand it as an equal predator. Through Ghost's enhanced senses and their neural bond, he reached out mentally, not with aggression but with curiosity, and the Void Stalker responded. For the first time since entering the habitat, the creature became fully visible. It materialized in front of Daniel and Ghost, its form stabilizing into something almost solid. The Void Stalker was huge, easily twice Ghost's size, with features that seemed to shift and change even as Daniel watched. Through the neural bond with Ghost, Daniel projected not fear, but respect. He showed the creature images from Earth, memories of apex predators who hunted with intelligence and purpose. He shared the understanding that predator and prey were part of the same cycle, that hunting was not just about killing, but about the challenge, the test of skills. The Void Stalker tilted its head, a gesture that was almost curious. This prey was different. It didn't run or fight. It communicated. Daniel took a risk. Through Ghost, he projected an offer. Not submission, not combat, but partnership. He showed the Void Stalker what he and Ghost had built together. A bond based on mutual respect, on shared purpose, on the understanding that 2 intelligent predators working together were stronger than either alone. The Void Stalker circled them slowly. Daniel could feel the creature's intelligence, ancient and alien but undeniable. For eons it had been alone in the dimensional void, the ultimate hunter with no equals. Now for the first time it had found something interesting. Not prey, not threat, but possibility. Through Ghost, Daniel extended the neural bond, not forcing but offering. The Void Stalker hesitated, then accepted. The connection formed, and Daniel's mind filled with images and sensations beyond human comprehension. The creature had hunted across dimensions, seen realities that Daniel couldn't even imagine, but it had always been alone. Through the triple bond, Daniel, Ghost, and the Void Stalker shared thoughts and feelings. Daniel showed them his vision of what the coalition could become. Not a hierarchy based on strength, but an alliance where different species brought their unique abilities together. where intelligence was valued as much as physical power, where adaptation and cooperation were recognized as the ultimate evolutionary advantages, the Void Stalker understood. More than that, it agreed. After countless lonely years, the creature had found not masters but equals. Partners who saw it not as a monster to be contained, but as a predator worthy of respect. Daniel heard Vexus and Razor approaching through the jungle, hunting desperately for any sign of the Void Stalker. Other surviving pairs converged as well, drawn by some instinct that told them the final confrontation was near. Through the bond with the Void Stalker, Daniel sent a request. The creature responded immediately, using its dimensional abilities to create